It was August 7th, 1994. A small town named Oakville, tucked in the misty green stretches of Washington state, woke up to something strange. It had rained overnight. Nothing unusual in this part of the country until someone noticed what the rain had left behind. On driveways, on rooftops, on leaves and grass. Not water, not dirt, but gelatin. Clear, slimy, and sticky blobs about the size of rice grains covered nearly every surface. Thousands of them, everywhere. Local police officer David Lacey had been out on patrol when the blobs first caught his attention. His windshield wipers smeared the jelly rather than clearing it. It was as if the rain had bled something alien into the town. He pulled over, examined the material, and immediately felt uneasy. He put on gloves and scraped some into a plastic bag. "This isn't right," he told his partner. "This isn't water." By morning, dozens of people across town were calling 911, not for the blobs, but for something worse. They were getting sick. Officer David Lacey wasn't new to strange calls, but this was different. As he drove through Oakville during his shift, the jelly rain made it almost impossible to see through the windshield. He turned on the wipers, and the slime smeared like grease. He pulled over near an old logging road, stepped outside, and saw the jelly shimmering on the hood of his patrol car. It was cold to the touch, and somehow alive-looking. He wore gloves, but even then, he reported feeling suddenly nauseous. A headache followed, tightness in the chest, dizziness. His partner felt the same. They assumed it was the smell, or maybe they were just tired. But later that day, Officer Lacey was admitted to the hospital. Symptoms: shortness of breath, extreme fatigue, and vomiting. Diagnosis: unknown. He wasn't the only one. Back at home, Dottie Hearn, a local woman in her 60s, was found collapsed on her bathroom floor. Her daughter said Dottie had touched some of the blobs earlier that day while picking them off her porch railing. She too was rushed to the hospital. The cause? Acute viral-like symptoms. But no virus was found. At least 24 residents were affected. Nausea, fatigue, breathing trouble. It wasn't a flu, it was something else. And no one could figure out what. The first fall of jelly rain was strange enough. But then it happened again, and again. 6 times over the course of 3 weeks, gelatinous blobs rained down over Oakville. Each time they appeared, people got sick. Pets, too. Cats, dogs, even birds were affected. Some animals died. One vet in town tried examining the body of a cat that had come into contact with the substance. Its lungs were inflamed. Its blood strange. Locals began to panic. They wore gloves outside. Children were kept indoors. Some people even left town. The material was slimy but not sticky, colorless, and broke apart easily. It had no smell. When touched, it left a faint residue, like mucus, but colder. One resident said it reminded them of fish eggs. Another said it felt like human tissue. Rain clouds would form out of nowhere, dump the blobs in isolated areas, and vanish. Meteorologists were called in, but they had no explanation. Weather records didn't match the sudden cloudbursts, and there was no precedent for non-water precipitation like this. It was as if something was being dropped or released. The town wanted answers. The state got involved, and soon, they would take samples and find something even more disturbing than anyone expected. By the end of the first week, over 24 people in Oakville had fallen ill. The symptoms weren't consistent with the flu. They were stronger and stranger. People described sudden dizziness, blurred vision, nausea, fever, and trouble breathing. Some fainted. Some had seizures. Even worse, animals were dying. Farm dogs refused to eat. Birds stopped singing. One man found his cat curled under the porch, lifeless, eyes wide open, mouth full of foam. At first, doctors thought it might be a virus, but standard tests came back negative. One doctor at a local clinic described the illness as a severe viral infection without any virus. White blood cell counts were erratic. Patients were disoriented. Some recovered in days. Others, like Dottie Hearn, stayed sick for weeks. People began connecting the dots. The blobs fall from the sky. Hours later, people get sick. It happens again and again. Oakville residents started to panic. Kids were pulled from school. Residents wore masks. Some even believed the government was involved. And then someone decided to find out what the blobs really were. Dottie Hearn had picked up some of the jelly from her porch. It made her sick, but her family saved the sample. Her daughter, Sunny Barclift, had it analyzed by a local hospital lab. The results? Baffling. The blob was not purely environmental. It wasn't synthetic. It wasn't from a jellyfish or weather balloon. It contained human white blood cells. But how could white blood cells, which only live inside living organisms, be part of a gelatin rain? Doctors were puzzled. Biologists were confused. Sonny sent the sample to the Washington State Department of Health. They found two types of bacteria inside: Pseudomonas fluorescens, Enterobacter cloacae. Both are common in human intestines. They can cause illness. But what were they doing falling from the sky? Was this a biological test? A military experiment gone wrong? The town grew more suspicious. No one could explain how living tissue and gut bacteria ended up in raindrops. And worse, no one could prove it didn't happen on purpose. To get clarity, Sonny sent another sample to an independent lab, Amtest Laboratories in Tacoma. The microbiologist there, Mike McDowell, confirmed the earlier findings. The blobs contained cells from a living creature, but they were not human. They weren't plant, animal, or fungal. They were amorphous, biologically active, and highly unusual. And yet, no one could say what they really were. Later, the original sample mysteriously disappeared from the state lab. No one knew who took it. No official records remained. By now, Oakville residents were talking in whispers. This was a test. They're hiding something. We were exposed to something, and they don't want us to know what. No agency, not the CDC, not the Department of Health, not the military, offered a full explanation. The mystery became deeper, darker, and more unsettling. 6 blob rains, dozens of illnesses, lab results pointing to living matter. No conclusion. And the most disturbing question: was this from Earth or something else? By the third blob rain, the town of Oakville was no longer silent. Word had spread. Local newspapers published headlines like, "Mysterious goo rains from sky. What is it? Blobs may be making people sick." Oakville asks, "Are we being tested?" Local TV news stations picked it up. Then came national coverage. But it wasn't just attention. It was panic. Parents flooded the school district with calls. Businesses started closing early. Supermarkets reported people buying masks, gloves, bottled water. Someone even claimed the blobs were toxic waste, dropped by accident. Others said it was a biological experiment gone wrong. Then came the episode that changed everything. The hit TV show Unsolved Mysteries featured Oakville in a segment titled "The Rain That Wasn't Water." With dramatic narration, real interviews, and lab reports, the show turned the Oakville Blobs into national fear fuel. After that, reporters arrived from everywhere, but none had answers. The public wanted to know, why were people and animals getting sick? Why did no agency take responsibility? And where did the blobs come from? Oakville, once a quiet logging town, was now the center of a real-life sci-fi horror mystery. Soon, residents began pointing to the sky. Over the previous month, many people had noticed military aircraft flying over Oakville, more than usual. Loud, low-flying planes, unmarked, often just before or after the blob rain. The theory? The blobs were chaff, jelly-like particles used in military radar testing. Or worse, a biological agent accidentally or deliberately dropped. When asked, the U.S. Air Force denied any connection. They claimed no operations occurred over Oakville. But multiple residents, including Officer Lacey, remembered black jets and loud flyovers in the exact time frame. Then there were the blobs themselves, falling from cloudless skies, isolated only to Oakville. Some said, it's a test. Others whispered, it's punishment. A few believed it wasn't military at all, but something not human. A town meeting was held at the local church. The mayor spoke. Doctors, even someone from the Department of Ecology, all said the same thing. We don't know what this is. But no one said it wasn't dangerous. And no one said it was over. After weeks with no official answers, the speculation exploded. Some residents suspected the blobs were part of a military experiment involving biological warfare, maybe a test on civilians without consent. Why Oakville? A small town, remote, easily ignored. Theories emerged. Airdropped pathogens tested for spread speed and effects. Jellyfish bio-waste accidentally released from naval vessels. Extraterrestrial material from meteor dust or alien organisms. Secret government tests for weather manipulation or crowd control. There were no facts to support any of these. But the strange part? No government agency ever returned to investigate. Samples vanished. No final report was released. Oakville was forgotten. Only the people remembered. And they told the story again and again, in barbershops, in schools, in the park. Warning: if it rains strange again, don't touch it. Even now, decades later, people in Oakville look up when it rains. Because the real fear isn't that it happened, it's that it could happen again. With no answers from the government, locals, and soon the world turned to speculation. One early theory was that the blobs were the remains of jellyfish, broken apart and absorbed into rain clouds after U.S. military testing in the Pacific Ocean. Supposedly, Navy planes bombing jellyfish colonies had caused fragments to be lifted into the atmosphere, and the wind had carried them over Oakville. But scientists quickly debunked it. For one, no oceanic debris like salt or fish matter was present in the blobs. And two, the physics didn't add up. Rain clouds don't carry gelatin across hundreds of miles. Still, people wanted answers, any answers. Some proposed that the blobs were man-made biopolymer materials used in radar jamming. Others claimed they were aeroplankton, microorganisms living in the upper atmosphere that condensed into goo during rainstorms. Even stranger was the suggestion that it was space jelly, organic matter from meteor showers falling to Earth. This theory tapped into centuries-old reports of similar blobs falling during comet events. Some called it star jelly. It had shown up in 16th century Europe and again in Australia, Scotland, and Texas. But unlike those blobs, the Oakville material made people sick, which meant this time was different. Several scientists attempted to legitimately explain the Oakville phenomenon. One theory proposed the blobs were slime molds, a rare natural growth that can become airborne in specific weather conditions. But no mold DNA was found. Another focused on a type of cyanobacteria, or nostoc, which blooms in damp environments and can appear after rain. Still, this wasn't a match for the Oakville blobs either. Biologists from AmTest labs said the blobs were a matrix of proteins not matching any known animal or plant life. Could it have been a new form of organic life? One virologist noted that the blobs showed cellular structure, which might point to engineered bacteria or experimental life forms, but those samples disappeared before further study. Meanwhile, the Department of Health continued to deny involvement. No follow-up tests, no explanation, no comment. For many, this silence said more than any words ever could. A mystery left to rot, a question never answered, a science problem buried in bureaucracy and fear. Blobs have fallen in other places before, often called star jelly or plasma rain, but none caused illness like Oakville. Was it a natural biological phenomenon we just don't understand yet? A rare organism reacting to environmental change? Or was it something darker? Many still believe it was a secret test, a bioweapon experiment on unwilling civilians, a trial run for something bigger, and Oakville was just unlucky. Some even suggest the truth was buried so deep that even the people who ran the tests no longer remember. What if the real danger of Oakville isn't what it was, but the fact that it was never supposed to be noticed at all? Because real horror isn't always ghosts, monsters, or aliens. Sometimes it's what you breathe, what you drink, what falls from the sky unseen. In the decades since the Oakville incident, the mystery didn't fade, it migrated online. Message boards, paranormal sites, and especially Reddit lit up with theories. Some claimed they were children in Oakville during the blob rain. Others posted blurry photos of strange goo they'd found in other parts of the world. A 2020 Reddit post read, "My grandma lived in Oakville. She said her chickens died the same week those blobs fell. She always told me, don't trust what falls from a clear sky." Another user posted an old VHS clip showing local news covering mysterious rain goo. The comments exploded. Was this a cover-up? Was it connected to other strange weather events? Theories ranged from chemtrails to black ops testing to interdimensional portals. But most chilling were the posts from veterans, claiming similar substances were dropped during overseas military missions in the 80s and 90s, in places where illnesses spiked afterward. The Oakville story had grown far beyond Washington state. Now it was global lore, a cautionary tale for the digital age, a story of illness, mystery, and silence. The most disturbing part of this mystery isn't the blobs themselves. It's what happened after. Every single sample taken for official analysis gone. Dottie Hearn's daughter, Sunny Barclift, said she never got her sample back. The Washington State Department of Health? They claim no samples remain. Even the hospital lab notes from the time missing. No paper trail. No archived slides. No case reports. Only one scientist, Mike McDowell from AmTest Labs, kept a copy of his findings, but even his conclusions were unofficial. And yet, the illnesses were real. The blobs were seen by dozens. The rain fell 6 times. So why is there nothing left? Some say it was incompetence. Others think it was intentional erasure. If this was a test, the results had to be buried. If it was a mistake, it had to disappear. And if it was something not of this world, maybe we weren't supposed to understand it at all. Today, Oakville is quiet again. A sleepy town with less than 800 residents. Surrounded by forests. Draped in the same low fog. Still remote. Still peaceful. Still eerie. Locals don't talk about the blobs unless you ask directly. Some smile and say it was a myth. Others drop their voice and say it happened. But we don't talk about it. The place where Dottie Hearn lived? Still there. Weather-beaten porch. Empty birdhouse. A small plaque in the garden says, "We don't forget." Tourists visit sometimes. Ghost hunters. YouTubers. Conspiracy bloggers. But there's nothing to see, not anymore. Only a sense of something unspoken. Some say the trees grow faster here. Others say animals avoid the woods on rainy days. A few locals still carry umbrellas, even in sunlight. Because in Oakville, you never know what might fall from the sky. In the years following the Oakville event, scientists and researchers have occasionally weighed in. The many won't go on record. Dr. Charles LeBlanc, a microbiologist interviewed in the early 2000s, said, "The presence of human white blood cells is biologically impossible in atmospheric precipitation unless something died in the sky." Another, Dr. Madeline Croft, a toxicologist, reviewed the case and concluded, "If these blobs were natural, we would have seen them more than once in other towns, other countries. This was targeted." Some biologists speculated it could have been a mutated bacteria colony spread via industrial waste or jet fuel. Meteorologists rejected this. No weather pattern could explain the isolated blob storms. Psychologists, however, offered another view. Maybe it wasn't the blobs that made people sick. Maybe it was the fear of the unknown. Mass hysteria. Psychosomatic symptoms. But this theory crumbles when faced with autopsied animals, actual lab findings, and documented illness. Too many pieces. Too much sickness. Too little explanation. Whatever it was, it doesn't fit into science as we know it. After all the samples, studies, interviews, and internet rumors, we're left with more questions than answers. What exactly were the blobs? Why did they fall 6 times in just 3 weeks? Why only in Oakville? Why did they make people and animals sick? And why did every sample disappear? There is no official government report, no scientific paper, no environmental assessment, no case file with a conclusion. Just a town, its memories, and its mystery. Some believe it will happen again. Others believe it was never real to begin with. But everyone agrees on one thing. What happened in Oakville should never be forgotten. Because whether it was a biological accident, a military test, or something unexplainable, the silence that followed may be the real crime. And if the blobs ever fall again, will we be ready? Or will we be told, once again, it was just the weather? Today, the story of the Oakville Blobs is still told in hushed voices, late-night podcasts, and YouTube documentaries. For some, it's a creepy story. For others, it's a true crime without a killer. And for a few, it's a warning. Oakville became part of America's hidden lore, a town where science failed, truth vanished, and horror fell from the sky. Every so often, similar reports emerge. Sticky rain in India, transparent goo in Scotland, biological haze in Texas. None as large or strange as Oakville, but enough to keep the fear alive. The town remains quiet, the air remains heavy, and the mystery remains unsolved. Because sometimes the scariest things aren't what we see, they're what we're not allowed to know. Oakville was silenced. Let's make sure the truth isn't.